And welcome back. We are continuing with my guest, Glenn Steckling, about not only UFOs. Hi, Glenn. Again, we continue.
Alrighty, we ended the last section without addressing the what is called weather manipulation that has been talked about, done in Russia. We also do it here in the United States. I know that it's been tested, experimented with in some of the African nations. Basically, what it is it's an attempt in order to attract rain to very arid areas or arid conditions where it hasn't rained in a while and there are crops and things like that. And so basically we must understand the basic concept of rain. First of all, in order to get a drop of rain, you have to have a particle inside. That's usually a particle of dust or sand or whatever. It's a minute piece for the water to grasp itself to, and it clings to that. And so the more of those water molecules that come together, then you start to get clouds. And clouds then have what's called an uplifting motion, where the air comes from underneath and lifts these water molecules up higher and higher, and that's how you can watch clouds grow. When the cloud becomes mature enough in order for it to rain, the water molecule that's rotating lengthwise in there, up and down through altitude, has acquired enough moisture to it to become heavy enough to fall out the bottom. And that's what we call microbursts, these elevators of water that are just pounding out of the bottom of the cloud, and that gives you the rain in the area that you want. So we have tried to seed by using dust or sand or many other different particles in order to start the growth of rain so that we can get rain in areas that need that relief. That in itself is a very minute experiment when you consider the total picture of how environmental conditions or geophysical conditions of atmosphere are accumulated, because you have the motion of atmosphere that goes at different altitudes as you ascend. If you have topography like mountains, then the air hits the mountain range and then shoots up as well. And then you start to get what's called lenticular clouds that look like a lentil, and they pancake that stacks themselves on top of it. Some people take pictures of that and say, look, UFOs. That has nothing to do with UFOs. Those are lenticular clouds, and something to be very cautious of because it indicates extreme turbulence in those areas. And as pilots, we are cautioned and trained to stay as far away from those areas as possible. And so all of this is part of the atmospheric conditions, and we see, since we see a global geophysical change in temperature and in rain and motion of the winds, the high and low pressures, all these things are widely fluctuating due to the changing conditions on our planet. And so there are areas that used to get rain that don't, like for instance, when you look at the desert or in Egypt, at one point, 50,000 years ago, it was nothing but a big, beautiful grassland. And so many areas of the world change due to the changes in our planetary system and body. And then we have to learn to understand that if something changes, then we have to change too. And unfortunately, there are people in the world who are living by tradition, and they say, well, we have lived here for 50 generations, our ancestors, and we're not going to leave. But if the ground is drying up and there's no rain and no water and you got no crops and you can't feed your people, eventually we're supposed to be intelligent human beings, and we should be expressing that intelligence and say, well, it's time to pack up the bags and go somewhere where it's a lot nicer or better. And so we have our own belligerents to blame for some of that. But as we mentioned before, these are few and far between. And in collaboration to what we all see as the airliners traveling, by the tune of maybe 6,000 to 10,000 of them every day, it is not even a mere fraction of people who are trying to do some weather manipulation through seeding of the clouds. So that's an entirely different thing altogether.
Mm-hmm. That's the one topic. I want to now digress into different topic, but just one more thing, because in Russia they need that beautiful weather. So is it also possible to actually create sunny weather to disperse the clouds?
No, that I don't know, because if I would have to think about it based on the meteorological training I've had over the many decades, and you know, that the cloud is nothing more than the manifestation of the accumulation of moisture, and it usually takes about 1,800 meters or less, but usually more than 1,500 meters of thickness in order to develop enough movement in order to start to get rain and mist. And I have not heard of any way where you can successfully disperse the clouds other than trying to create a stronger wind that that would push that out of the way. Now, if they have developed a way to manipulate the high-low pressures in order to push them one direction or another, ever so slightly or whatever, then that might affect the clouds, but it's not instantaneous. That takes some time. So I don't know. I mean, how far each of these countries' scientific laboratories and minds much smarter than mine have gone is still, you know, to be determined.
Do you think, just one more question to this topic actually, do you think it causes also some turbulences with our climate, those weather manipulation? Does that influence? Because we actually are intruding, we're doing something against the nature, we are manipulating that weather. So does it have effect on our climate?
I would say that the instances and the variables that we can subject are very minute in comparison. So, you know, if you're able to push a pressure gradient in a particular direction, you can't do it for very long, and it's not permanent because the atmospheric motion of the planet itself is so great that that we have, you know, not much of an impact in it. And to give you an example, is that when the polar jet stream, or the funnel of air, the current and river of air that pushes south from the North Pole, it is like the inside of a tunnel, and that air can go as fast as 200 miles an hour. So if you're coming from Japan and you're going to the mainland United States, and it is always traveling easterly, if you get yourself in it, you can go 200 miles an hour faster and burn less fuel and get to your destination earlier. The only thing that you have to be conscientious about is that on particular areas of that polar jet stream, the turbulence is much higher than others. On the northern side of the jet, it's more mild. On the southern side of the jet stream, if you come popping out of it, you can get yourself into some real trouble with some extreme turbulence. And so, and you have multiple currents of air going one way in the northern hemisphere, the other way in the southern hemisphere, and so I think all in all, our impactability on any type of long-term weather phenomena is not of much consequence.
Okay, I think now we have it with this topic. I want to ask you about your personal experiences with aliens. Anybody show up, like you were a witness? Some meetings, were you talking to them, who that was, and so on?
Well, I would say that these experiences are primarily of a personal nature, and the interactions. I can give you one example that I have already discussed publicly, so we'll go there. when my father and I were in Frankfurt in 1989 for the UFO Congress and convention there, which was a messe there in Frankfurt that was organized by Michael Hessemann, we encountered 3, 5, 6, 7, 8 or 9 people from other planets that were there. And what happened is that we had this long display table near the entrance. That the display table Stanton Friedman originally wanted, and my father said to Hazeman, since we have been friends for a long time, and you basically got your start by having me over in Europe and in the early 80s, that I believe that we should be here in this spot. So Hesseman said, no problem. He grabbed Friedman's stuff, moved it somewhere else, and we took over that table. But anyway, there was a large influx of people over many days. I believe we were there for 3 days, Friday through Sunday. And at one particular point, when my father and I were sitting behind the table and we had all the material and pictures and posters and everything out on display, that we were sitting there together, and all of a sudden, my father's foot stomped on mine. And I looked over at him and I wondered, well, why in the hell did he do that? And so I ignored it and we continued on. And then he did it again. And this time he took his foot and he pointed in a certain direction at particular people that were standing there. And that broke my train of thought and what I was doing in order to pay attention to who was there. And there were several of the space people there. And I remember that one was a woman with a teenager. And she pointed to the pin that I have on my suit, which indicates that I belong to the Airline Pilot Association. She says, so you fly airplanes? And I said, yeah, that's true. And she says, well, I fly something too. And I looked at her, and then I looked at the younger one, and they were both just looking at me with their eyes just shining and with this little smile on their face. And so then my recognition was complete, and I was paying more attention to what was going on. And so another one of them was talking to my father, and we still had a large crowd of people around us. And so this particular person, I can still describe him to this day, turned around and walked up the 3 steps to go to the corner to go to the public lavatory. And I thought to myself, I'm going to get some answers. So I'm going to follow that person into the room there, into the bathroom. And I walked into the bathroom about 5 seconds behind him. So the door had opened and closed as he walked in, and then I walked through the door. And the inside of the restroom was totally vacant. There was not a soul in it, and there were no windows to escape out of. And believe me, I looked everywhere. There was nobody there. And so after a few minutes, I came back out, and as I came out the door, he was standing a few paces away, and he waved at me. And so later on, when I got ready to film my father doing his lecture, I was set up in the back of the lecture auditorium with my video camera. And I saw him come in. And I thought to myself, in my mind, I said, boy, would I like to film this individual. But at the same time, I got the same thought that I had been taught all my life to not jeopardize their identities and to be respectful of who they are. So as he walked in front of me, about 10 paces or less in front of me, and he stopped to look at a child who was sitting there. He did what we call Kopfkratzen, when he gets on your head and pets your hair. And I'm thinking to myself, I want to film, but I'm not going to. And when I finally made the decision not to, he looked up at me and smiled, because he could read my thoughts and he could tell what was going on. Later on, earlier than that, we were up on the second level having there's a little open cafe there, and my father and I were sitting there, and he was frantically rewriting a speech because one of the speakers down there, I believe it was Bud Hopkins, or it may have been Professor Mack, I don't remember, but whatever he did, he was giving a lecture that was very aggressive and very fearful, and the people were kind of apprehensive, and my father said, this can't happen. And about 3 tables away, we're sitting 3 more of them, 1 woman and 2 men, because the women never travel alone. They always travel with at least 1 companion. Wow. And because of what they consider to be the inherent dangers of this planet.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so, she got up and she came over, and it's the person. She could have been in her late 20s by our standards, which would have made her in her mid 60s. In reality, in age-wise. And she says to us, she made a request for something, and we said, of course, you can do that. And so my father and I leaned together so she could take a picture, and she says, we know who you are very well. And she says that, and you're absolutely correct, that what's going on downstairs is a travesty. And she looked at my father and she said, I hope you take care of it. And so he did. He went down there and he started the lecture, and he said, first of all, they weren't aware that he was native German and spoke it fluently. So he spoke to them in their own language, which right away is something to make the people comfortable. And he told them, he said, now that we have heard enough of what is aggressive and fearful, let's look at the other side of the equation, which has a lot more rationale and substance to it. And everybody clapped themselves stupid over that, and they were very happy because of it. And so we interacted with several of them during that period over a couple days, and I have not seen them since. Some of them I have seen since, interacted with them many years or decades beforehand, and it's always an interesting exercise because they look the same, but of course I look old and haggard. And so I have changed, but they don't change because they live an entirely different lifestyle than we do.
But are they like keeping their youth, or shapeshift, or just take a body, or they just look like that?
First of all, they would never take a body because that is against nature. Only the creative force, or God, as you want to call them, or the creative intelligence is designated in order to create that life.
So and no possessions here, everyone.
No possessions. Space people do not even the bad ones do that, because they know that as we mentioned karma before, the repercussions of the law of compensation will fall upon them, and they don't want to pay that price either. Not for you, and certainly not for anyone else. And so they're not stupid. And so they live an entirely different lifestyle. They live a life that is without disease and without stress. The greatest cause of our deteriorating body and minds is stress. George Adamski made that statement in 1960 on live television, which he was also on the panel with a doctor, and the doctor laughed himself stupid and said, "You're nuts." And we have found out here over the last decades that stress is one of the greatest causes of a shortening of our lives and life expectancy and the quality of our lives on top of it. And so that stress comes from many different avenues. We have stress from what we perceive to be an environment. We have stress from not getting what we want, as we mentioned before, and we'll make that correction now. It was not Gandhi, but it was the Dalai Lama who said sometimes the greatest blessing is not getting what you want. And I have to agree with that wholeheartedly. And so we are driven, we are taught to be driven by ambition, by competition, and all these factors that do nothing more than wear and tear on our body, on our minds, And so the geneticists, our own geneticists, have made a statement not but a couple years ago that said we are capable of living at least a couple hundred years in this body. So why aren't we? And that's because we live an entirely deteriorative, stressful life, and they don't have any of that.
Where are they living? Are they also living on our planet, like regular?
There's a few of them that are coming here to visit us. They used to have a system that was very much like the same concept we had as of the Peace Corps, and that the Peace Corps sends representatives of our society into other countries in order to help the indigenous people in order to develop, you know, a much better quality of life. And they have the same system, about a 2-year system, where they come and they remain amongst us, and consequently they take whatever job they can find. They are not discriminatory like we are. We look down at the garbage collector, and we look up at the doctor. But if the garbage collector didn't come and pick up your garbage, pretty soon you'd be swimming in it, and your streets would be filthy, and disease would be riddled. So every person has something to contribute. And also, they live in a society where they have mechanization with androids and robots to take care of the hard, arduous work that we relegate to the people of third world countries, who we indoctrinate to come in and do our manual labor. They don't have that either. And so they don't have a system of what we call economics. There is no money. You are not working and expressing yourself for the accumulation of some stupid piece of paper that's printed with an ink and has a number on it. That doesn't exist with them. And at the same token, they do not have any portion of their society that says, well, I don't want to be a part of this, and I don't like this, and I want my own way. No, you don't get there unless you are ready to live in that type of environment. And so they do not have what we consider to be malfeasance.
You know,
if they did, they'd bring them here.
Yeah, I just had a thought that I would love to interview one of them.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, what occurred to me that they would not come forward, probably because that's giving so much attention that it will actually cause a lot of stress.
Well, it'll be much more than that. First of all, as I told you before, they go about the Father's business without the need for pats on the back or for accreditation or any of these things. This is not who they are. And so they will never go in front of the camera and sit there and say, you know, I'm from so-and-so planet. As we discussed earlier in one of your programs, we have plenty of charlatans who are doing that now in our world.
Saying that they are from other planets. Yes, exactly.
Right. But they would never do that because, first of all, they know that the powers that be on this world would quickly arrange for their abduction and medical experiments or hold them captive. And this is a very dangerous world. So if you would be out there admitting to this, you would be, if you were considered to be legitimate, you would be immediately in danger. And that's why have been long taught, and I exercise.
So I'm sure I'm not gonna get one.
I exercise the responsibility of not exposing them, because that's not for me to do. If they wish to have that done, they can do that much better than I can, and choose the circumstances and whatever. The reason that we have had contact for as long as we have is the work we do, and secondly, the fact that we honor their anonymity, their privacy, their anonymity. We will not sell out in order to say, oh, look how fantastic I am, or look how big I am, because, you know, I interact with this people and this people, and then I have to expose them. I had one person at one meeting say, well, show me a picture of one of them. I said, well, I could do that, but you wouldn't see that any different from anybody else. And so I could basically pick up this magazine here and show you a picture of somebody there, and you wouldn't know. And so consequently, why would I endanger them? I never forget, one of them said, you know, he said, you people are so discriminatory in your thinking. He says, one of the best disguises I have ever used is a pair of clear glasses, because no one would ever expect, because we have this personification that they have to be angelic beings and super this and super
Right.
that. And so he says, I put on a pair of clear glasses and everybody walks right by me and doesn't give me a second thought. And I thought, well, there you go. That's knowing the psychology of the people here on this world pretty well. And so, but I can assure you, they are looked less just like us. They constructed just like us. They're anatomically the same. And the only difference is they are so aware of the magnitude of creation. They literally live a reverence for, I would have to say, God.
Mm-hmm.
And
but are they living here for a pure enjoyment, or watching us, or trying to prevent?
No, I would say that living here for enjoyment would be counterproductive.
Exactly.
As I told one of them, I said, boy, are you lucky, because you know you have a ticket out of here whenever you want to. My sorry behind is stuck here, and I'm not happy about it. And so, no, they are here for a particular amount of time to do a certain amount of work. I give you another example. There was one that there were actually two of them that went to get a job, and this one was at a newspaper, and one of them got the job and the other one didn't. And so the editor and one of his reporters, because this UFO subject was so prevalent then, were arguing in the office with the door open behind the glass, about UFOs and space people and all these other things. And so this one young gentleman walked in and said to the editor, he says, well, we can settle this conversation right now. He says, in the bottom of your desk drawer, locked in the desk drawer, is a railroad spike, which is a very large, heavy iron nail that you pound into the planking of the railroad to keep the tracks down. And he had one as a souvenir from some historical past. Oh, I say it would sit about maybe almost a foot high and a half-inch in circumference, made of solid iron. And so the editor says, well, how do you know that's in my desk drawer? Because it's locked. I've never taken it out. He says, well, just give it to me and I'll show you something. So he hands it over, and the space person takes it and puts his finger on the top of it, and the bottom of it's resting on the solid desk. And he takes the finger and he pushes it all the way down till it was even with the desk, just by the pressure of one finger.
I want him to teach me that.
Well, remember, they're not here to do circus tricks, but it got the message clearly across. And so he smiled at the two of them and left. And so the editor said, boy, I'm going to catch him tomorrow. And boy, we're going to cross-examine him. And he never came back. They never saw him again. Of course. But it answered, for those two minds that were debating the questions that they were, it answered their questions in the most, I would say, simplistic way, free of argument, free of debate, free of ramifications. Just there it is, and you can look at it, and that's it.
They have a lot of sense of humor.
Well, I would say that. I would say they have a sense of humor, and so that's a couple of instances of I have in Washington, when we were there, we knew one that worked as a park ranger, another one in the White House, the other one in the State Department, and I'll tell you one more. And I think my father described this as well in the book that I sent you. But when he was writing his first book, Why Are They Here? Spaceships from Other Worlds, in 1967, he was writing it, and it came out in '69, Vantage Press. I still have a box left of them. They're very rare, and they're original. But two of the space people would come to his office at the Mayflower Hotel, because he would work late at night after work in composing the book, and they were helping him compose the book. And so he said to them, he said, since this is such a aggressive and unpredictable world where people You know, you cannot rely on them to maintain any type of reasonable thinking. He says, how do you protect yourself? Because they will not take another life in order to protect their own. And
Wow.
so it said very simply, we remove ourselves from circumstances. He says, for instance, if I'm walking down the street, I can pick up the thoughts and the events that are in front of me. And if something's going on in front of me that can be potentially dangerous, then I already turn around and go the other direction. So I never put myself in that situation. He says the other thing is we have a little device about the size of a cigarette lighter that we wear on our belt. And this uses Einstein's unified field theory and bends light rays. This is the same device that they have for their spaceships as well. And so consequently, when you activate the device, it bends the light rays around the object that's within the field. So you can look at them, but you won't see them because the light is not projected back into your retina, into your brain. They are still physically there. You can hear them, you can touch them. There's no change. So my father said, boy, I'd love to see that work. So about 2 weeks later, my father, my mother, and I are walking up 17th Avenue. The Mayflower's on one side, the National Geographic building's the other. And down the street comes walking one of these space people that were helping my father with his book. And he was carrying his laundry hamper going to the laundromat. And so as he got closer, we waved at him. He waved back and then suddenly disappeared. And we stopped and we could hear his footsteps as he walked past us and behind us. And as we turned around to follow the footsteps, he suddenly reappeared, waved at us, and continued walking. And that had to do with Dad's request to see that device in action. The spaceships use them as well. So all these people that are claiming that these spaceships are beaming into another dimension or shape-shifting or all this is all science fiction garbage. This has nothing to do with the actual science and the technology behind it. The science, first of all, is they can bend the light rays around so you can't see it. The second thing is they can accelerate so fast that your eye can't track it. I believe your eye is capable of about 4,000 frames per second, and they can accelerate faster than that. So the moment they're there, and then the next moment they're here, they can accelerate so fast that you didn't see it. You couldn't track it. And so there are all rational explanations for things that people are purposely remaining unaware of, or they are just plain ignorant. And they're making claims that are totally unsubstantiated because they do not do that kind of thing. They believe in, one of them said very simply, you have 3 dimensions. The third dimension is what you are living with now. There's one more dimension called a 4th dimension, which is the area which thought is manifested. But you're not living in that. You're living in the physical location of your creation. And even though your vibration might be a little bit different, depending on how crass or how refined you are, you're still physically living in this dimension. There are not hundreds of dimensions in which you walk through, like walking through the doorways of a bus station. He says, you people come up with such fanciful notions. You know nothing. They travel the cosmos, and even they say, they are discovering new things all the time. We just travel in our minds and make up the rest. And that's the great difference between us. They are the knowers and we are just the guessers.
Oh my God, I'm smiling because I recently was making a little sketch, little fun of the so-called esoteric, this approach that we are ascending to the 5th dimension, 10th dimension, and so on. Sorry, it is so funny because it raised, of course, all these kind of questions like, are we going to take our bodies or not with us, right? So, whole point.
You must. You have to understand.
Yeah, exactly.
There is a Trinity. What the church calls the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, or what others call body, mind, and consciousness. You are required all 3 in order to manifest and express. The consciousness gives you an idea, and it can be tied into the universal consciousness as well. The mind is there in order to translate that thought into a practical application. And then your body responds to your mind in order to make that practical complementation a reality. So like an architect, first you conceive, then you draw the plans, then you go and build it. You cannot exist without a body. You are instantaneously transferred at death to the next form. When that child, when that baby is born and takes the first breath, you are transferred into that form. It doesn't make any difference whether it's here, across the continent, or 50 million miles across to the next galaxy. It is instantaneous. And that is how you are created. And you're not floating around as energy and all this other things. That's not how creation works.
That's interesting that you mentioned this 5D, 4D, and like living, moving to another dimension. But I personally think that spiritual growth, or our growth, just evolution, is to combine whatever happens in our imagination and life into facts, into living in this world, because imagination is beautiful, that we do create different stories, and without the thought, without imagination, the architect cannot
But it has
for that house.
to be imagination based upon the rational parameters of creation. You just can't,
Exactly.
In other words, you can't just decide, well, like Steven Spielberg, let me do a Star Wars movie or whatever, in which the creature is sitting there in the bar and it's got 15 eyes all over the place and all of this other stuff. There has to be an imagination that's based upon natural principle and not just the unbridled, uncontrolled thought of our minds. And that there's a great difference between mind and consciousness. We here on this world exalt the mind. We believe that the mind resides in the brain, and therefore you are all mind, and therefore this is where your intelligence is, and that's not what it is at all. Without consciousness, if consciousness leaves your body lays there flat. You can be in a coma. You still have a mind, you still have a body, but you cannot express, right? But so you cannot reside without all three. You cannot just take one and yank it out of the equation. That's why we are so ignorant with our imaginations, because we don't want to accept or understand what natural principle is. Natural laws. All of creation abides by it. There is no such thing as chaos. Doesn't exist. Everything is for a reason. Everything.
Fantastic. That explains a lot, and I hope to clarify that for a lot of people still, because they have this crazy idea that everything is possible. They can just think about it and it happens. And it takes effort. It takes daily practice. And even, by the quality of the questions, sometimes people are asking, like, is it possible to remove pain? Yeah, it's possible. Sure. But, if you don't know the reason of that pain, then you're shooting blindly. You may be okay for a while, but it's, like approaching the topic from completely, insane perspective.
Well, you have a central nervous system for a reason. And pain is a precautionary a symptom to let you know that something's not right. So how would you know if something wasn't right if you didn't get some kind of an indication that is part of the creation of who and what you are? And so, can you control pain? Yeah, you can, but then you better pay some attention to it. Many doctors will tell you, well, can you give me a pill for this pain? And they'll say yes, but what happens is the moment let's say you got a problem with your foot, and the moment that I give you a pill and that pain goes away, you don't take the time and be responsible and rational thinking to just sit back and take care of that. you right away start running around in order to do everything you want, and you aggravate the situation even worse. So it's our own adolescent attitudes that cause us so much problems.
I'm going to give that another example here, because also people want to achieve something in life. They want to become someone. And we all have a different structure. And if you are fed by the society, like you can be, I don't know, millionaire, whatever you want to achieve, they going against their own structure. Maybe in the structure, they don't want to be that, or they don't have a capacity to achieve that. And not everybody can, you know, run a marathon. If someone is born with, you know, certain disease, like a chronic disease, yeah, sure, it is possible to help it out to a certain degree, but this person probably won't become a first in a sport. And people are dying. They going against themselves because someone out there promises them, if you follow me, so religion, organizations, anybody, you can achieve anything. And this is one of the, you know, biggest lies, that you can achieve anything and become anybody you want. So basically, if you don't have navigation, like, you know, system, like for the pilot, for example, you have to be tested if you're capable of doing that, right?
Well, yes, but let's look at it this way too. Are you capable of achieving a goal that you set yourself that may be beyond your reach? And the answer is yes, because we are extremely versatile creations. If I focus all my attention, all my energy towards towards whatever, playing golf 10 hours a day, or playing basketball, or playing tennis, or whatever, and I do that every day for 10 hours and then 11 and 12 hours, of course, I'm going to get better. Absolutely. Yes. Because that's all I do. But that is an extreme. And that extreme burns up your energy from within too. So that's why when you look at these people, you can see that they may look young in form, but their face looks haggard and tired, like there's no tomorrow. And so because we are operating in an extreme expression of thought, we are capable of immense things. But then you have to look at the reason, why am I doing this? And I think that our ambition is usually coupled to the acquisition of profit. And so very few people do anything for the sheer enjoyment of it, because if you did, then you would never do it to an extreme. You would enjoy it and then let it go and go do something else. And so this acquisition of profit, there's an old saying that you cannot serve two masters at the same time. And that's a very true statement, because if you are so concentrated on one, you give it all of your attention, and it soon becomes your fixation. And then you have to neglect the other one. And for most people, that neglection is their own inner core and their resources. So I think the elimination of profit and the elimination of competition is something that and we find these two concepts alone. Most people would not want to go to another world, nor would they feel comfortable there, because these two items alone is so foreign to their thinking that they could not grasp it.
Yes.
They could not grasp it. And so consequently, they will say, well, what do I have to strive for? What is it that I have to express for? And how about inner acknowledgement, inner intelligence, the greater perception of creation? We are so in such a far imbalance of things that we have moved ourselves away from what is called joyful living, right? So we live in a house, and let's say the house is, Like I mentioned before, I live in a house. I'm comfortable enough. I don't need anything bigger. But most people would find that very unusual, because, oh, you should have bigger this and bigger that and a nicer neighborhood and a newer car and blah, 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 blah. But my answer is, but then I'm a slave to these things. My
Yeah,
whole
yes.
existence would be striving to sustain something that was unnecessary. But most people gauge themselves and label themselves on their acquisitions because they don't know who they are. If you ask a person, who are you? Oh, they will tell you, I'm Italian, I'm German, I'm this, I'm that. And I would say to them, you're none of those things. That's nothing other than the origin of your birth. But who are you? Who is living in this house of clay? They have no answer for that because you're not Italian. You're not your traditions. You make them yours. You latch on to them and you're told, oh, this is who you are and you must maintain that. Well, no wonder we don't get anywhere.
Right.
We put ourselves in a bucket and it's too deep to climb out of.
Yeah, it's also the aspect of the money, of course, involved. But I hope this is really clear for a lot of people who still struggle about what to do in life, how to do it, that it's supposed to be enjoyable. And not everything is necessary. Like, for example, let's say I want to be a pilot because I think it's enjoyable. For the pure joy. I don't want to work in it. I just want to fly.
Yeah.
So have a joy of it, but it takes certain amount of money. Let's say I have no that much time. Let's say I have enormous fear of flying. And then, of course, we have to take into account how much energy and time and lessons, of course. Is it even possible? I think it is possible. I actually had this idea once. I thought it's cool to fly. Sometimes when you're watching those movies about pilots, the moment they're catching in these documentaries, the moment they have this flying freely, it feels like a freedom, like you are beyond everything, like you are free spirit, like you're flying.
Well,
I don't know if you had that.
It used to be that way when everything was less regulated and less pressures. Now the job carries such immense responsibilities. Management tells you that you are the captain, the pilot in command, and your authority is final. And then human resources and all the society things say, well, you can't do that, and you can't tell the flight attendant what to do, and you can't do this, and you can't do that. And then you have emergencies that happen, medical emergencies, or God forbid, a mechanical with the airplane, and you have to make decisions that are right the first time. You do not get the luxury of saying, oh, well, I shouldn't have done that. No. So
Oh,
the
wow.
pressure of the responsibility of having to do the right thing every time, all the time, can quickly, talk about stress, that can quickly wear on you.
Great that you mention it, because again, on my example, we do that example for purpose. We have certain imaginary, oh, how great it will be. And we don't know what it takes.
No.
What it really takes. And we only, when we start to do that, we learn that, or we need to investigate or ask other people, like I'm asking you, so what it takes to be a pilot. Frankly, it is a wonderful idea. I would love to be a pilot. But when you mention those spaceship, I think that's easier.
Yeah. Well, I would think I would enjoy that. I would enjoy that a lot more because there's a lot less pressure, and I can tell you that after flying for 45 years, and I don't miss it. The one thing I enjoyed about it, was once you're up and away at altitude, then you can relax a little bit and you can look down and you can see the different geology and topography and places that you cross over, which I found very interesting. But all the regulation, all the oversight and observance, I mean, they are always looking to blame your decisions for any little thing, even when it's not your fault. And
Wow.
and so I would say that the joy of flying, if I wanted to go and enjoy flying, I would go up to the little airport in the mountains where they have the gliders. And I would just simply rent a glider for an hour and take one of their pilots with me. And we'll go and fly around the mountains nice and quiet because there's no engine. And you learn to fly the hot air thermals in between and allow that to lift you. And then come back and land, and you enjoyed it because that was actually a more pure expression of flying than, oh boy, all the stuff I would have to do just to, just to get out of a major airport and the traffic and the communications and things like that. It is quite a strenuous job. There's no doubt. And since I'm retired to it, I don't miss it one bit.
Wow, it's so good to know, because of course my ideas about it were fantasy. It's so beautiful. It's only beautiful. Of course, it takes training, it takes effort, it takes, certain time and energy. But I thought once you have it, you are free. And apparently, that's not the case.
No, it's not at all.
So maybe when will we get to fly those alien ships, and will be all fun?
If I knew that, I would spend less time talking about it and I would go do it. But
maybe you get a chance soon.
who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah.
Did you ever, can I ask you that question? Did you ever were invited for the spaceship and try it and pilot it?
No. No, that hasn't happened yet. And I think to some degree, they are aware of what my responsibilities were, and so they didn't want to put me in a position where I would have drawn the attention of the authorities or agencies that would not be very nice. And so rather than make life more difficult for me, they left it to time. Whether that happens in my lifetime, I can't say. I know my father wanted it to happen, and it didn't happen for him. But then he left us very early at the age of 55. And, he may have gotten that chance later in life had he lived that far. But once again, that is nothing more than a desire. It is not a criteria. It is not a litmus test for belief and for doing what I do, So, and I realize that once you go aboard and you experience the things beyond this planet, then you have a great struggle within yourself because there's a duality. You experience, and Adamski said this very same thing. You experience how people should live and should work and interact with each other, and how it exists in other places which we deny doesn't exist. You always are told by the psychiatrists and psychologists, oh, people are generally bad, there's nothing good about them, they can't do this, they can't do that, they're murderous and mean and whatever. And so when you experience the opposite of that, and then you have to come back to what's here, then you find yourself, for lack of a better word, living in two places at the one time. And some people can't handle that, right? And so, the idea is to do something that makes sense of it, is a progressive nature. They do not just arbitrarily throw things at you without the very detailed study of consequences.
For your personality.
That's right. That's right. Because I know eventually when I pass from this world that I can go to a place where all of that exists. And so I do not look at it as an unattainable, an unattainable imaginative fantasy. I know that one way or another I'll get there. Some ways are different than others, but
did they talk about it? Like it's possible to choose? did they watch the people who are dying and moving toward, I don't know, their
Yes.
planet, like reborn
Yes.
on
Yes.
their planet?
Yes, they can track that. Your soul has a particular frequency signature.
Okay.
And so it can be tracked.
How the soul is making decision to say, okay, now I want to live on that planet. Is it free, or the frequency, you know, matters who you are on this planet?
Well, I would say that you have to prepare yourself in order to blend in there. You cannot just expect, you know, it's like, you know, you take Attila the Hun or Genghis Khan and you take him to a beautiful Pacific island and then drop him on the seashore and said, oh, here you are. That doesn't work that way. You have to prepare yourself and you have to affirm that you are willing to live by these principles. Do not expect from somewhere else what you don't put into practice here. Right? And so it doesn't have to do anything with UFOs. It doesn't have to do anything with extraterrestrials. There are many people who are very devout in their belief, and they may be leaning religiously one way or another, but the core principles of what was taught, to love one another, to not do each other harm, and so on and so forth, if they live these core principles, as Jesus said, in my Father's house there are many mansions, and there's a place for you. So it is not just one single avenue. And so if you live the way that you are designed to and should, that'll be enough to get you where you need to go. Because here becomes more and more destructive, and you don't want to come back here. Trust me, the next 100 years on this world will be such like you have never seen.
Oh, you're talking about transhumanism? We will get to that topic.
No, what I'm talking about is that the direction of this civilization and the condition of the planet will continue to deteriorate, and that we will see changes that are not going to be very pleasant, and changes that will be an exhibit of the savagery of people's minds and themselves. We will do to each other that which we are so good at doing, that which we blame all the extraterrestrials for, but they don't do any of that to us. We do that to each other.
It's not going to happen. Do you really think that we are going that direction? That's going to happen?
Yes.
There is no hope that the civilization chose that negative path.
Unfortunately, the civilization is composed of people, and the majority of the people, 95% of them or more, are participating in that particular state of mind. And so the so-called new ageism that says, oh, well, there's this age of Aquarius or this or that, or some benevolent force will come out of the cosmos to do that, is absolutely garbage.
They say that
it doesn't take into account natural principle. You and I have different understanding. You and I, while we may be close in many things, we're still different from each other. And as the person that walks across the street is different from you. This level of understanding would be equivalent to being in school. Some of us are in first grade, some of us are in 12th grade or in university or whatever. And no force can come down and drag those who are not at that moment of intelligence and recognition, drag them to another spot which they will not be able to handle, assimilate, or accommodate. That is completely against natural principle. That is nothing more than a fantasy myth of the New Agers, because nature will never force you into anything. You have the ultimate right of decision, and you have to exercise it, otherwise you never learn.
You see, we were talking about this illusion of information before, and unfortunately, I think that this new age sayings that everything is good, this is more than 50% of enlightened people on the earth, I think it's just a sleeping state of mind, that we do not see the evidence that people are more kind, because every time, you know, since I talk on the channel and I meet people, some people claim that they are so spiritual, yet they are becoming aggressive or offensive if they do not agree with the points of view of some of my guests. And no matter how here I am doing my best to present, like, I do not even have to agree with my guests, but we can still respect and talk about it.
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm seeing a lot of positive change. That's true. I don't know if it's more than 50% because it has to be this impact. I want to believe that.
Yeah.
I want to believe that. But of course, as long as we are not going to fix our water, air, and, you know, lose the electricity, petrol, and go to this, you know, electromagnetic, you know, way of flying, probably, and of course the governments, you know, taking, like in Poland, some people say, like, you know, the government is run by psychiatric patients, right? There is this statement like that, and probably in different parts of the world also. So the government always about the power, about the gaining power, gaining money, or, you know, whatever that is. So I hope it's not so negative, and I hope that we still have a chance and it is going to get better. But even those new age people talking about creating communities when there is no credit cards, when there is only cash. But the only thing I have something to say there, if they isolate themselves from those big cities when maybe there will be another government not so friendly, then this big government eventually with their weapons and technology will also take over those little communities. So it is always about communication with those that they hate so much.
Well, let me ask you a question, Joanna. Most people, and if you're honest, most of us, most people, fear change.
Oh, yes.
All right. Well, so let's look at this. If you say to people that we're going to change the economy, that means that what the money that you make will not exist or be different. The money that you put away for your pension doesn't work anymore. Whatever you've saved and invested for your retirement will be gone away too. When people realize that the change does not come with government, the change does not come with notable personalities, the change comes from each and every one of us. And until we are willing to give something up, then there will be no change. It has to start with us first. And that means we will have to go through a very slow and difficult process in order to start changing ourselves. And that example of that change then will reflect towards other people who will say, oh, well, look how she's doing. She's doing very well. She made these changes. I'm going to try it too. And that domino effect has to go all over the world. I don't think we have that time left anymore. That's my own personal thinking. That has nothing to do with hope. Of course, I like to believe that hope is eternal and always available, but it doesn't mean that it is relegated to this one particular circumstance. So for instance, this is just one tiny speck of light in the infinite cosmos. I mean, think about this. You look up in the night sky and you see what your eyes can see. Some of the constellations would never made any sense to me, some of the stars and so on and so forth. Now you take up binoculars and you look into that same sky, and now you see all the stars that are behind it that you never could see from the naked eye. Now you look through a telescope, there's even more. Now you take on the internet and look at a picture taken by the Webb telescope into space, and the entire view is totally saturated with stars and galaxies and spirals. And I mean, it's literally by the hundreds of trillions in the same space that you looked before, and you could only see rudimentarily what your eyes were capable of seeing. So all those stars exist beyond your eyes. And all the motion of that cosmos is in motion too. The light that you see from this star was generated 1 million years ago. So you're looking at that light, at that star as it was 1 million years ago. That star has now moved over 1 million years to a completely different location. That's why I personally don't put much into astrology, because I know space science, but some people do, and that's for them to learn themselves through, and that's fine. But when you look into space, you will see that the entire cosmos is full of celestial bodies, and you cannot make determinations simply based on the restricted ability of your eye to see something, when so much is behind it, and so much is even behind that. And then you start to learn that the Earth is nothing but a speck of sand on the beach, and there are other worlds that are like this planet, where the stage of development is replicated, because if suddenly this planet ceased to exist, those individuals who did not have the ability to jump to the next higher development would be transferred to the planet where the same type of environment as we have here is, more or less. And so
I have to ask you a question. So I'm going to ask you a question. So why these aliens are here? Didn't they have a little bit of hope or strategy? Actually, in their case, it's more strategy to help the planet move in the right direction, assist the humankind.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's not that bad. It's not that bad.
There is always hope. But I think we have to understand that there's difference between hope for individuals that we come across versus the entire society. That's an entirely different thing. I mean, let us look realistically. Look at the Aztec society that built on top of the Toltecs, who built on top of the Olmecs. You know, they said, I have Latino friends that say, well, look how advanced our technology is, or was in the ancient times. I said, yeah, it was so advanced that you killed 30,000 people, women and children, by cutting out their hearts and throwing them down the pyramid. How advanced is that? Then when you look at that entire society that is so ingrained in that thought, how many of those do you think you can really shift an entire society? Only in ancient times, when we were a lot less people and we had figures of much greater power and ability. But even then it didn't last. Look at Emperor Augustus. He brought in the Pax Romana, that was the largest time of peace ever in Roman history for those 60 years. And he instituted laws and governance of morality, and Rome flourished. And then as soon as he passed away, they got the tyrant Tiberius. So nothing lasts forever. And even with his abilities, he couldn't influence the entire society forever. It's not possible. But what we can do is connect to those who want more, who hope for more. But if I walk through the streets of New York City and I look at the bedlam, and I truly am not discriminatory, but open and aware to what the situation is, no, I don't think that there is any chance for those people. If there is, they're going to have to find it for themselves, because nobody's going to come along and force it upon them. I think
nobody's going to come and save them.
No, I don't think so. And this brings about a very important thing. The space people said, because they're watching our planet very closely and monitoring our sun, and we're seeing changes that could indicate the end of the solar system if things accelerate the way they are. And it will take the deterioration of either the sun or one planet first, because when a planet crumbles out of orbit, it's like a Swiss watch, the rest of them crumble too. The balance is very fine, and that's how the orbits are determined. Nothing is just thrown into place. And so they made a statement that they are in the process of moving their populations off their planets, because they realized that the stability of the solar system is in jeopardy. And they said that should they have any extra ships available when the time comes, they will come here in mass quantities and they will land and they will open the door, and that's it. They will not stand there and wave to us. They will not invite us. They will not influence the decisions that we have to make. And they said for those who are unfearful and attune and walk themselves into the ship, they will be the ones that go to the next system when this one is destroyed. But they also said that 99% or more of the people will not do it.
Interesting, because I had a guest that was remembering and dreaming about it, that he was actually in the ship like that, and behind him the earth was burning. So now we enter the timelines. Is it possible that this happened? He lived maybe in another reincarnation on another planet. Maybe that wasn't Earth. Maybe that was Earth. So that's a very interesting message.
It could be that he lived in a different place, or more importantly, he tuned into the frequency of upcoming events.
Future.
The future. That's correct.
That's a very interesting one. He's not going to listen to that because he doesn't speak English, but warm greetings to Siegfried, because he was like the most, you know, I started basically this channel with talking to him, and also talking about a lot of those theories from different angles, and we didn't agree all the time.
That's my middle name, by the way.
Yes, but it was very good and evolving. That's a great message, because I actually wanted to ask you what is the message of the aliens, and you gave some very, very strong information, because I heard that theory before, like what if they are going to come and open, you know, the ships, and whoever wants to come along, considering spaceship. So when, I'm not saying if, but when you get to the spaceship with aliens, just stop by and take me on the boat. I would love to.
What happens is you will have them land in your area too, and so it's up to you. Here is the reason why so many of us will fail to leave. First of all, we are too tied to our possessions. We are too tied to our relationships. We are too tied to our relatives. And the first thing we're going to try to do is notify all the people we know that they can come too. They will be fearful and say, no, 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 don't go, don't do it. They're going to eat you or whatever. And then you will hesitate. And when you hesitate, then you will lose your opportunity as well. You have allowed those negative thoughts to influence your decision. So I would suggest that you think about it, and that the only thing I'm going to do is simply call the people I know and says, the ship has landed, you gather your stuff and go. And that's it, because that's the end of my conversation.
Okay.
I'm already going.
Yes, Glenn, what would you take on the spaceship with you?
My dog. I like my husky. I like my husky, so I will take him with me, since I like his character and he likes me. Other than that, I'm taking, well, maybe a golf club, but that's about it. I'm not going to take anything else. There's nothing else to take. What is it that would be of any need? Because everything that you can possibly need or want will be supplied for you by going on board.
So they say they're going to take us to another planet that is like Earth, so we can breathe, we can drink water, we can sustain ourselves.
They have already transported people to the next solar system, which is Alfa Centauri, which is about 4 light years, if I remember correctly, away. And it is a system in much better condition. The planet's there. They have deposited their people. And they have already taken they have already accepted 200,000 or so volunteers from this world, which have transported there already.
What an information. Why didn't you say that from the beginning? It took us.
You didn't ask. You didn't ask me.
What else I'm going to ask you? Oh my God, we are getting into very interesting and more interesting information, because of course it sounds like a sci-fi. There are actually sci-fi TV shows about it. Alpha and Centauri, like, you know, their arc, another TV show, like the people are actually looking for another planet.
Yeah.
So there's some ideas already on our Earth that this may happen. And I also had a friend of mine, and she was asking me, like, what do I have to do with Mars? And I said, how do I know? But then I started to have this vision when I was talking to her, like she wanted to prevent a war, like everything was burning. And I started to tell her that, and she instantly started to cry. And she's a very logical, analytical person. So that was pretty interesting. Again, that may be.
She may have a memory of the past, because they did have they had global conflict on Mars many centuries ago. In fact, the deep canyon there, that's 3 times as deep as the Grand Canyon, is the result of nuclear exchange. And
Yes.
And so
Oh, I have such a chills.
and so consequently, she may have memory of that previous time when that was happening. And
you know,
so,
you know what I saw there? I saw not only the fire, the bomb was different. It was without a fire, because the fire was like not really so dangerous. The bomb was like looking like transparent air that exploded the whole planet or people. They didn't make it to the spaceship to fly away, and she wanted to prevent that conflict. And what's interesting, in this lifetime, she's taking care of the conferences of those, you know, the little vehicles sent to Mars to check.
Yeah, because she has affinity for it. She has memory for it.
Yes.
It draws her to that thought, and thereby it causes action on her part that is drawn towards that affinity. And that's very natural. The important thing is to be able, for her, is to make that recognition so she understands why that is, because you don't want it to drive your entire life, because you've lived that in the past. You don't want to repeat it.
That's a good one. But isn't it another one that some of us, maybe we do remember those catastrophes from the past, and we are here to maybe prevent it. And I'm not talking about, you know, encouraging people now to be a messiah or something like that, because that's also not the way. But just to understand the deeper purpose of our, you know, our journey as souls. Like maybe we are also here having not only one purpose, to evolve as a species, as souls, but also to, some of us want to prevent that and influence whatever happens now.
Well, in the past, about 12,500 years ago, you had the 2 supercontinents of Lemuria in the Pacific and Atlantia in the middle of the Atlantic that sank beneath the waves, because the geophysical construct of the planet is not only tectonic plates, but they are also land masses that rise and submerge based upon the gas belts and also the underground water belts. The water that comes up during a flood does not come all from the ocean. It also comes from underground. Your underground water suddenly springs out of the ground and comes up in such a huge amount that it floods everything. So there are several different geophysical aspects to this planetary change. And in this case, the people were warned about that, and some of them successfully went to other countries and created other colonies. For instance, the upper region of Egypt was colonized by Thoth. He was not a mythical figure at all. He was from Atlantis, and he brought his survivors, and they settled into Egypt at that time. And so these geophysical changes will continue. There is nothing you can do about them. That's part of the natural process of the planet. But what you can do is by understanding the process, you can remove yourself from the danger zones. For instance, Mexico City is built on 3 different civilizations, and is surrounded by some of the most active volcanoes. And it also sits on a gas belt. And so instead of saying, well, this is a geologically unstable place, we have built one of the world's largest cities of 25 million in that crater of Mexico City. And now the volcano, Popo, as they call it, is becoming more and more highly active. If that ring of volcanoes suddenly burst, that city's gone, done. And all those people, will perish.
Why
right?
build there? Yeah, the city.
So why build there, number one? And why, now that you're giving the warning signals, don't you get out of there? Think about Vesuvius and Pompeii and Herculaneum. Vesuvius was giving precautionary rumbles and smaller smoke eruptions long before that volcano went super hot, right? So why wouldn't the people say, well, let's get the heck on out of here because this doesn't look good? So they ignored it. And so they all become, entombed in the pyroclastic cloud and became ash. So it's not nature to blame. It's our own stupidity for not recognizing things for what they are and then placing ourselves in a better situation. If you're going to live on the shoreline, you can't complain if a tsunami wave comes and wipes out the shoreline, because that is a possibility of having there. But most people think, well, I'll just take that chance, Russian roulette, more or less, right? Because we like it. And so there will be consequences.
That's the thing. I always wanted to live by the seaside. Always. And I got to live in The Hague. It was beautiful. But of course, I'm missing that. It gives me something, like my soul wants that. I remember that. I even had a dream, like, where's the place that you're most happy? And in the dream, they showed me waves that were like, it's the place where snow turns into, water, waves. And I don't know still where that is, but it was a beautiful dream. But I also had a number of dreams how dangerous water is, and how exactly a lot of those catastrophes were coming. And I was meeting like monks telling me it's happening now. Right?
That's exactly what happened. Yeah.
Maybe there are places where there is safe to live along the seaside, but a lot of those places, maybe you have to feel it by your intuition, or what the geologists are saying, what is the most because basically they talk that California will go underwater, New York will go underwater. It didn't happen, but it's still a possibility, right?
Well, because if the geological features change and you get some mass movement of the seafloor and what have you, at one time sea level was almost 400 feet higher than it is now. So if that ever reverses and that sea level comes up 400 feet, well, then that a certain X amount of miles of coastline are going to be obliterated. I once did a little research to see how far inland a 500-foot wave would go, and that was about 10 miles. So 10 miles of the coastline would be obliterated, not so much by the water, yes, but by all the debris that is carried along by the water will knock down and obliterate the other stuff that it pushes towards it as well. So there is. So I think that it's wise to, like in the Pacific Islands and Hawaii, some areas are more susceptible to the direction of tsunami waves coming from Tonga and Fiji and Samoa, and the eruptions pretty large, 7.9, 8.0 earthquakes on the seafloor and what have you. So there is some definite geophysical warnings that are out there, and I think that You know, it's only wisdom to be aware of that, so that, you know, if you need to pack up and go, you're somewhat prepared.
That really deserves another program about safe place currently on the world and when it's going to happen, because of course we need a knowledge.
Well, when when cannot be predicted because there are too many variables with the planet itself. So, for instance, you know, there is a chamber effect. So when you have a large earthquake in Turkey, let's say, which sits right on top of the earthquake and gas belt zone, then you typically have a reciprocating one somewhere in the western coast of the United States or in the Pacific Islands. And so there is an effect of this energy is not only releasing up, but it releases along the fault strata zones as well and travels along there till it finds a weakened area upon which it will influence it. And so there are just so many variables involved. I mean, if you start to see the sun spitting off immense auroras and solar winds and all plasma, you know, things like that, then you start to have to wonder about what is all going on. But like I said, you don't want to get so consumed with this that you live in a constant state of precaution and fear. You know,
Exactly.
you still have to go about some, you know, reasonable thinking and rational actions and some progressiveness. And, you know, it's an idea that you just want to be aware of, so that in your case, probably the closer to the Alps is a more a safe environment. You know, I personally like Garmisch-Partenkirchen, but you know, it's
Hold on, the mountains or the Heidelberg?
Heidelberg. I don't know what altitude they go
Yes,
to.
because you said actually Kirchheim, and I understood Kirchheim is a part of Heidelberg, but it's actually
no. I said Garmisch, Garmisch-Partenkirchen.
okay, that's somewhere else. Okay, yes,
Mhm.
yes. Well, there is a Heidelberg mountain that Hitler was liking that mountain because it was place of power. There were druids there, and of course, yeah, some things he was doing there, pretty powerful. But yeah, maybe it's gonna happen, maybe not, maybe in 300 years.
Yeah, and maybe tomorrow. We don't know.
Maybe
I mean,
tomorrow.
when you think about it, yeah, most of the Netherlands and Holland and all those coastal countries are almost underwater as it is. It won't take very much for that to flood and to and push back the water levels miles and miles inshore. And so, yeah, once again, it's something that may, you know, something one has to be prepared for it. Yeah.
Okay, we are going to pause and continue next week with the part 5. But I will probably ask you, maybe you have some more information about this Alpha Centauri next time. And what else are the messages from your alien friends? We respect their privacy, so probably nobody will come to interview with me. However, if they like to write me an email, or to Glenn, you are very welcome, if you're hearing us, to write him email, and we are going to talk about your messages to the world and what else can be done. So we have more than hope. We actually have a strategy, and we can do things every day, step by step.
That's right.
Why not? Thank you so much for today, and I'm already looking forward to the next part.
Okay.
All right, everyone. So write your questions, and because of course I'm so invested in the conversation, so I didn't ask a lot of questions probably on the way, but I will. Just remind me. I will ask those questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Till the next time. Bye bye, everyone.